So now, hold on a second. Look at that. We're like bumping up. Hey, everybody. It's Medium Brandon Ross. And
Lindsay Mastro, Medium and Mentor. Hello.
Fantastic. Like we could have guessed it was you. How's it going, kid?
It's going. It's been a few.
Daryl has taken the reins, by the way. Daryl is back there with bells and whistles. So now she's putting up a couple of hallelujah hands going like this in the background right now. She's like, praise Jesus, because this is the only thing that will turn her to religion.
Take the wheel.
But she said, I don't know if you hear her laughing, but she's like, oh yeah, you're right. Anyways, this is an exciting show. Happy Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Is it Groundhog Day or is it Groundhog's Day?
I had this debate last night in my head because I was like, what do I actually say? And then I started thinking about it and I couldn't rationalize how I say. I think it's Groundhog's Day.
But isn't there only one groundhog?
Possessive. I don't know.
Isn't that?
I lost my grammar skills.
Yeah, it's only Groundhog Day.
Grammar Nazis here.
I
think it belongs to the groundhog, so it should be a possessive. That's what I think. I'm gonna go revisit with my 8th grade English professor.
8th grade? That was insulting. My gosh. So is it?
How do you learn that stuff?
Well, I think that these are like hard-hitting questions that we really should be asking on a podcast like this. I really do. I think this is where we have to go with this. Well, of course, we're going to make the show all about the groundhog and its day. How about that? How do you like? Am I the only one that doesn't know the difference between the possessive and the whatever? So we just restructure the sentence like all together, so that it's just whatever. And of course, it is a pagan connection. It is a pagan design. It is actually embolic, which is the candle mass of the pagan wheel. So right there, February 2nd, getting ready for the Austera, which is also known as Easter, coming out of the Yule. So embolic is the space in between the winter and the spring. It's kind of the halfway point, which is how, from a pagan standpoint, as we know, every major holiday or quasi-religious holiday. Have you ever thought of Groundhog Day being a religious holiday?
Not in particular religious, but definitely. Well, I think most people, or myself, I guess, would equate religious with like Christian traditions, and in that way, I wouldn't call it religious, but it is very spiritual.
Isn't there a level of sanity that you need to have too, in order to be like, it's a fucking Groundhog Day? And think about think about the premise of that. I mean, what do you think about the whole shadow thing in terms of? I mean, we kind of get paid to predict things, and here's a groundhog poking his head out, going, "Yeah, fuck it, we're done." Like,
but I mean, he has the same like understanding and result that a weatherman does. Like, they can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. It doesn't really matter. They're just like, whoops.
You're right. And the ironic thing is that there are 6 more weeks until March 21st, which is the start of spring. So if they're like,
right either way.
Yeah. So it's kind of like I was wrong. Well, just wait 2 more weeks. Like, calm down. Like, what kind of a prediction is that? It's kind of a dart throw anyways, right? When I was down in Casadega, I kind of got in a little bit of trouble because I'm like, listen, mediums speak to dead people. You can get validation. Either they're right or they're wrong, or it's applicable, or there's validation points. I'm like, but when it comes to psychic stuff, you're just throwing a dart. Like, at best, you're going to be 20 to 30% at any given time. And my point was about free will. But some of the council members were like,
hey,
What do you mean we're not accurate?
We don't need people to question this.
XA on the first of all, get him away from the curtain. There was that as well, right? But yeah, so it was an exciting thing. What has been your take on Groundhog Day, like from a spiritual thing? Do you find the same themes that you found in the movie, which we will talk about today?
I do actually, and I did rewatch last night. I was like, you know what, I should go and like do a review.
Good for you, because I did not.
My husband was like, did you really just put on Groundhog Day? Groundhog's Day? What is that? And see, what's the name of the movie? Is it Groundhog Day or Groundhogs?
I don't know. Daryl, you've got the placard. You might want to add in the present button there.
It's Groundhog Day, I believe.
Okay.
Let me see what I can do here.
I believe in Bill Murray, whatever it is, and Harold Ramis. So
Harold Ramis for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was interesting to rewatch it because you kind of have like your general ideas about the movie, and most of what sticks out obviously is just like the trauma of the repetition. And then it has some good ending, but if you haven't watched it in a while, you don't really remember. It's just kind of like, oh, it's nice, and he wakes up and finally it's tomorrow. And rewatching it was truly going through like the journey of the spiritual awakening. Which
it completely is.
It's cool.
And it's funny, we're going to talk about that in in my segment about the theories and the premises connected to it. There's some weird internet stuff out there about that movie, and there's
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid if we were to believe the internet. I mean, we still believe that somebody came down off a mountain without any witnesses with stone metal tablets, but here we go. And it's what's also kind of comical about that movie and that delivery is that you're busy laughing because it's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start to apply it and go, oh my God, I kind of do the same thing. Like in that movie, and again, I don't want to steal all of our thunder, but at the same time, we're here. He starts to do the most absurd things.
Oh, yeah.
Like he steals money, and then he goes back and forth between the altruistic of like, hey, I guess I could be a good person, but since I'm not going to be a good person, I'm going to steal all this money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you go back and forth for that. Hey, Daryl, close that out.
Okay.
Yeah, so it does say Groundhog Day. That's incomplete for some reason.
That's why I put it on.
You put it up because it's incomplete?
Okay, how do I get it
So I'm going to save this again. You might have to re-upload that so that then it because I had the entire cast members. That's the thing I was most concerned with. But the other part of it is that that cycle for like when you apply it to your own stuff, you really do beat your head against the wall sometimes because you're just like, oh my gosh, this is torturous. Mm-hmm. This is hell on earth. And you are meant to feel that kind of Tolstoy effect, is in like, how many pages do you need to describe a battlefield?
Oh my God.
How many? Yeah.
Watching him go from first just like confusion and then falling into complete ego of like, oh, I'm going to get with this chick. I'm going to steal this money. I'm going to just know everything about everybody. Then he gets into like boredom. And then that turns into despair, like full Dark Night of the Soul, tries to kill himself 5 million times.
Right. And it talk about a spiritual awakening. And then what the entire metaphor is, I'll save it for my part, but it's really the ego. Mm-hmm. It is 100% the ego. So in other words, to elevate spiritually, you need to kind of have that. But yeah, so I know Daryl's making that better on that side of it. Why don't we talk a little bit about the both of us just have this background in HR, and we decided to kind of come up with a few more of these parts. And I hope you guys are enjoying the show. Right now, it looks like we're getting good broadcast out there. Fantastic. For whatever reason, we didn't get it last time. Daryl's shaking me off. I'm going to email it to you. And there we go. I'm going to email that to you. But I think we were going to talk about human resources and kind of like the odd stuff that we would get into with these things, because there are things about life lessons and there's things about, true things, because when you're an HR person and you're dealing with personnel, there are like scenarios, quick wit scenarios. And as kind of like an icebreaker for Lindsay and I, we've kind of talked about like our war stories. So we've got like all of these awesome war stories about, about human resources and that sort of thing. And we were going to like just start saying, okay, what would you do in this situation? Okay, what would you do in this situation? And then we realized like that should be a freaking segment. Like we should just like, where would you go with this? So I'm going to be answering these in some form of tongue in cheek. We'll get back to the Groundhog Day stuff again. And by the way, this is dedicated to all of the human resources people out there that are stuck in their job, that have gotten through their January uptick, making sure people are registered, for your healthcare benefits. What else did you have to do in January?
Oh, I think January was more like paperwork, because everybody, and it's troubleshooting, because nobody did, get into their open enrollment in November like they were supposed to, and then the brokers screw up and send you the wrong charges, and it's all admin early year, which could be a welcome respite to the insane peopling of the end
situations. Oh my gosh. So
this used to be like my thing before I started diving into spirituality, was my like push and my mission to help people understand that HR is not what people think HR is. And unfortunately, there's a lot of HR people that perpetuate this kind of stereotype of HR being like rule driven and for the company, and or for employees, like one way or the other. And I used to spend a lot of time just preaching about like what real HR is, and it's changing the understanding of the industry. But
it's funny though, because have you ever sat with that CEO or that higher level, kind of C-level, executive level, and they're just like, they look at you as pure overhead. And they're like, you don't really do anything, do you? And then you're like, okay, I won't do anything. Good luck with that.
What's interesting is I've reported to the C-level in small companies, and so they bring you on knowing that they need you for a purpose, or to bring you into the new times, or change, or update, or whatever.
Let me tell you about the trends that I read on the. Let me tell you about the trends that I read in the back of the newspaper while I was flying in, or whatever. That was always my favorite line. That was always my favorite line. Like, I learned it in an article while I was flying, and I'm like,
why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't we doing this? Well, sir, because, and I say sir because it's always a sir. Like, why aren't we addressing this? Because you brought me in to make changes, and then every time
PowerPoint.
And then every time I do make changes, it's like, oh, well, we don't want to do that. No, we're going to ignore that. But so that's the story, is, they bring, unless you truly work in a people, community-driven social organization, they're out there, they're growing. But for the most part, like, you kind of get shit on as the HR person. And
but though you're the cleanup crew. You are, you're like the wet team that has to go in and clean up the stains. Like, it's awful. That was a horrible depiction, wasn't it? But highly accurate if you've worked with some of the nuts.
Not inaccurate.
Yeah. Right now, people are literally going to our LinkedIn going, who do these two work with?
Oh, geez.
I've erased some of them.
I don't say the names of companies because
never.
And I genuinely grew and loved each company I worked for. I grew out of it. I grew above it, whatever it was. But, that being said, there's some good stories in there. So LinkedIn away, there's no secrets, but you can DM me and ask me for more details.
As I'm sitting here pulling up my LinkedIn going, I probably should have did that a little scrub a little bit, but I'm game.
We're going to hide those.
I'm game. I have no rehirable status. Like, when you work by yourself long enough, you can no longer work for anybody.
I I've only been gone a year, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I can.
Let me tell you something. If any of those, and I still get phone calls to do consulting, and sometimes I'll say to them, "Here's what I do. If you're willing for me to pull all of your astrological charts and talk about your childhood trauma and why it is you can't get along, and what your communication styles are and everything else, I'm in.
Well,
If you want me to come in and push paperwork, I'm not it."
That's what I do in consulting, is I bring all that stuff together, and people
know.
who love it, but people who don't, I really don't want to work for you anyway.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. So, all right, give me a scenario. Let me, I still want to call this WWBD. I want to call this What Would Brandon Do? But, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Lindsay stories. So these are all true stories. Either I handle them directly as an HR
I love it.
manager, or I had people that worked for me that handled them directly. So, first one, small company, about 150 employees. I got to give you some background because you have to know.
Sure. You've got to set the stage. So on the SAT, this is the reading comprehension application part of it. Okay, that's kind of what we're doing right now, and I'm okay with that. Small company, $150 employees. All right, I'm going to use lingo too.
Multiple buildings, multiple locations across New York State. Okay. There is an owner of the business who is not around a lot, but reachable if needed. Then there are a handful of operators of the company who step in like owners, but are not owners. Okay. Probably.
So you already have a power struggle here, Alice.
Oh, this is the story of this company.
I know where it's going.
So, high level manager, not one of the operators, comes to me. One of the owner operator type people comes to me and says, "I've had it. It's been 20 years of abuse. I've been scolded at. I've been sworn at. I've been, just completely berated so many times. And this is the last straw." They came in and he threw a phone at my face and it hit me on my shoulder. And
classic assault, even.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And this is it. I got to be honest. This person has worked for this company for like 25 years. He's a great leader. Loves the people that work for him, loves his job, but he's like 25 years and he's like friends with this person. And he's like, I'm done. I don't know what to do anymore. And he wasn't really asking for a solution, of course, because they never want to do anything. They just want to come and complain about it. But as an HR person, they're like, okay, this is assault. We have to do something about it. So you're in the position of the HR person with this complaint. What do you do?
Why is this taking 20 years? Why were you able to sit there with it for even the last 2 years? Like, give me another example. When was the how frequently does this happen? Because I'm willing to kick the can off the top of this worm fest. But if we do this, you've got to be willing to know that the consequences here are up to, including firing you, because they have that kind of pull. Yes, you have some sort of ownership thing, but they'll buy you out if that's what you want and that's what you're headed towards. And let's talk about a buyout. Let's not start talking about the things that you're talking about right now, because your name will end up in the paper and you will not be employable after this. I'm saying this as a friend. Right now, I'm going to be, so I would always do this good cop, bad cop thing and be like, listen, you want to talk about everybody else's business? That's fine. But once you do that, they're going to talk about yours. And it's a conversation about their solution. And I always ask the first question I always ask in any of the, I'm tired of this. I'm sick of this. They did this, they did that. And then I say, what did you do? What did you say? Because if you haven't said anything, you let them do it. If you didn't do anything, you're allowing it to happen. Moreover, if you want to come to Jesus powwow meeting, that's great. But I'm going to spend all my time and energy on that. And if you say yes, know that I'm going to be all in and I'm going to be relentless and I'm going to be up your shorts for the next 3 to 6 months over this. And it's unpleasant because you're asking me to do something unpleasant. My guess is what I think you did is you calmed the pastors, you took the other one aside and said, did this happen because you really need to apologize? If not, this is just going to get worse because now it's on my radar. How'd you handle it?
Well, similar conversation. Another follow-up question for you. Do you involve the owner?
I don't think you do. I don't think you do until you're ready to be actionable, because if the owner isn't there, right? It wasn't the owner that was throwing the phone, right?
No.
Yeah, so it's like the owner doesn't want to hear jack shit about it. This is the reason why they have owner operators. The owner operators is in like, guys, I am here for my 14% every year. If I get 15%, I'm happy. If I get 13%, I ask what happened. I want 14%. They have an expectation to not have to be there and not have to run it. So they're expecting you to do it. I would not have included them into it on the initial conversation. My escalation level would have been, if they hit the button, then I got to know that I'm going to go up. That's the only reason why I would have done that there.
Yeah.
Pretty close, right?
Response to everything you just said is, well, okay, first I'll tell you, very, very well known in the community. Huge, good person persona. The person responsible for the highest amount of sales in the entire company.
Always a chief salesperson. You got to have the BDE if you're going to swing it, right? Like you can't come in.
Impressed with him because he goes above and beyond for them, and then
expects
the entire organization to just fall in line. And then after that entire conversation, he says, "I don't care."
Oh, and then I would say, okay, how do you want your lesson?
Yeah. So like,
how do you want your life? That's exactly how I would say it too. I'd say, how do you want your lesson? Because I just explained it to you what the consequences are. And you say you don't care. Okay. I don't care either. You just need to acknowledge the fact that I read you your rights. I have given you the HR Miranda Act. I have given you this is what's going to happen. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a public forum. Like that is, wow, that's a kick in the crotch. So what was your resolve there?
Eventually, this was like ongoing. Of course, I only gave you like this one kind of climax situation. The fights continued. The back and forth continued. Of course, the manager didn't leave because he wasn't going to leave. Eventually, I encouraged him to go to the owner directly. I first did contact the owner. Did I say lawyer? I meant to say owner.
No, you didn't. But what was the owner's reaction? Was the owner kind of like, I want my 14%?
She
okay.
Felt.
See terrible. Listen, I'll fall into that trap right there because women owners typically want a hand in it. In fairness, before everybody loses their shit about me thinking that all owners are men, typical male owners will be an absentee. Female owners typically dive in.
I purposely mention that she's a she, not for the whole, man, woman thing, but because this one person is like a son. So she's never going to fire this guy. She probably will have a conversation with him, but if she finds through the grapevine, or if I have a conversation with him and then he goes to her, then my ass is on the line as my job. So
you have no idea how many, like, so sometimes when HR doesn't do anything, it's because we're saving our own ass because it has nothing to do with going there, right?
Ridiculous politics. So rock and a hard place, for me, for him, for the manager. So I made sure that the manager was taken care of by constantly having that interaction with me. I tell the person he's complaining about, like, this is a real problem. This is going to blow up in your face. This is not just a little company thing. This is a public, like, this will get out. If it comes down to you or me, it's not going to be me. All of those conversations. And I did pull in the owner when the behavior continued and when there wasn't, like, it didn't escalate, but it was just a constant, straw.
Yeah, knowing that dynamic, that they were kind of like, the step kid, so to speak. I would have talked to the owner and just basically said, listen, I know this is your boy. I'm just letting you know that this is something I'm managing, but I'm not going to manage it because my expectation is that you put him in your back pocket as your second son or whatever. You need to manage this. Like, you created a parent dynamic and it's not okay. He's assaulting people. Like,
I want to go back to some of these comments on here because there's like, experience with HR. As a temp, the HR of this firm didn't handle workplace toxicity. Yeah, that's just a shitty HR person. No protection for employees or contractors. This I want to address. There is protection for employees and contractors. That's actually, especially, I don't know where you're from, in the state of New York, at least.
I think they mentioned Massachusetts.
All of the
Yeah, she
protections
says
for
Massachusetts. Yep.
which is a blue state, so it's not to the level of New York, but it's up there. But it has to do with
I
politics.
love it.
So the no protection, there is a plenty of protections for
There's
employees
tons of
and
employee
contractors.
protection.
The issue is the people that are responsible for any type of peopling in your organization either are too defensive or the owners and operators don't have their shit together. So the HR person's in the position of having to defend them all of the time to protect the company because there's too much one-sidedness going on. So what are you waving your hand for?
I'm waving to Susan
Oh,
and Flan.
I thought you were like, stop.
I'm like,
I'll go on to a tangent. But HR's job is
I'll
not
change
to
the subject. Yeah.
It's not to defend the employee and it's not to defend the organization. HR's
Yeah.
job is to step in and be able to navigate the complete, like, think about when you're in an argument with somebody and you're like, okay, but
Oh,
there's
yeah.
truth somewhere here in the middle. All we're trying to do, if you're good, if you're an actual, like, reasonable, ethical HR person, all you're trying to do is make sure that it's a win-win for anybody. Sometimes that falls in support of the employee, sometimes that falls in support of the company. But the understanding that HR is like, oh, they didn't care about me. I guarantee you HR is sitting there doing all they can for you and probably being handcuffed by the owners of the company or the high-level managers.
Yeah. It's funny. It's one of the most political positions in any company is HR because you have to be politically correct. You have to be spatially political. You have to be, you really, as an HR person, you're like, oh, there's a thing tonight I have to go to. Like you get forced into that crap all the time. And that's really what burned me out. That's what burned me out. It was the shouldas.
Look what happened during COVID. HR was the only position that everybody could go to. And what do? HR people don't know. We're just sitting there trying to read all the same regulations that are coming out. Like, we found that regulation the same day you did, bro. Like, what are we supposed to be doing? So it's just soothing the waters as much as possible. It's making sure the organization is positioned in a way that can grow appropriately. And again, this is with the caveat of this is a person who's a people strategist. They're an employee relations, expert. I'm not talking about your payroll processor that also, does your hiring paperwork. These are very different positions.
Yeah.
So,
and COVID did do something to most companies, though. I mean, forget about the ones that would get the PPP loan and the people that didn't and the scams that went on with that. But it also made companies look at their policies in a completely different way. If you didn't have a work from home policy, there was an HR person somewhere writing it on March 14th.
And probably
horribly because that's a true to life thing where they're like, we haven't tested any of this shit.
Yeah.
And then, what about
what to do? Like, there's no
what
magic.
about the companies that force their employees to get the vaccine?
Mm.
That's a whole other thing. Like, you just talk about HIPAA compliance issues.
Talk about New York State issues. Like, we fired the entire nursing population. Oh yeah,
which wasn't. Yeah, here,
I feel like we talked about
that.
We might have talked about that on the last episode.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That
this whole thing gets me heated up, I'll tell you.
Right. No, it's okay. Yeah, being a nurse, I probably have a different perspective, but I was definitely on the side of you should get a vaccine because we're, the forefront of this pandemic. You have to protect yourself and your family. It's not about
or it's for my family's sake and my sake. I do not want to get the vaccine, and because of that, I have to lose my job. That was it. Wasn't just like the safety; it was being forced into a position of having to defend whatever your beliefs were because of a state regulation. Like, what? Can you tell I'm a libertarian?
Well, no. And it's funny, even without the even without being forced to do it, like, there's no HR department here. Like, I'm I'm the chef and the bottle washer, right? And I'm the janitor. I'm all the things, right? So I was going through the very sincere practicality of like, if I'm ever going to do like home parties, should I get vaccinated? Like, should I have the conversation and tell people, and should I require them to be vaccinated? And then I sat back and I'm like, spirit's going to spirit,
Yeah.
Spirit's my HR. And my HR department is my series of spirit guides.
I think it's in my book. It says I'm HR for spirit or HR.
Oh, that's okay. Perfect, right? Well, that's also part of the conversation too. And my experience with the vax was I had to set aside time, right? When you work for yourself, you can like, you had to take the one day to get the shot. So I'm like, okay, I'll front load the morning. I'll get the shot in the afternoon. I'll go home. I'll sleep it off. I'll keep it a light day the next day. So I'm essentially losing a day and a half. And I went to go get it. And it was when we were doing the drive up thing. And I'm like, am I really driving up for
Isn't it funny? Like, it wasn't that long ago. But if you think back to all the crazy shit that we did because nobody knew what was going on, it's insanity. We shut down our lives.
I'm like 6-7 cars deep and I'm seeing them just, run a swipe and jab somebody. I'm like, I'm watching people get their shots. I'm like, what the, like, this is odd.
What are we doing? This is like
two cars in front of me. I'm like waiting like 10 minutes. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Guy comes out fully masked up and he's wearing his hazmat suit and he goes, and I pull down my mask. I'm like, what? And he goes,
2 fries,
and he pulls up
Coke, and 3 double Whoppers.
It's exactly what I did. But he pulls up his hazmat suit and he goes, we're out of vaccines. And I'm like, what? So they ran out of vaccines. So then I'm like, okay, I can't do this. So I'm going to do the one day. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking up where the Johnson & Johnson is. And as I'm driving to it, I had to go out towards, it was in like Rome or something. It was in the middle of the state. And I'm hitting the road and I'm driving. And sure enough, for whatever reason, I never really just listened to the radio. And I turned on the radio. I'm like, let's see what the world's coming to today. Turned it on and they're like, the quick and sudden pull of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has us all troubled and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, as I'm driving to go get it, it's gone. And I'm like, okay, Spirit, I have heard you. I've heard you and I'm out. Like that, those were 2 instances where I went to go get it. And then the third time, I think when I looked into it, that's when they started coming out with, oh, by the way, you can't, not only does it keep you not immune from it, but you can still spread it regardless and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's when I really started to question it. And this is where the conspiracy theorists went nuts. This is where everything, whenever my personal kind of take on this, conspiracies notwithstanding, is I work my immune system pretty good. And I work at this pretty consistently. I don't want to get anybody sick, which is the guilt trip in it. But I also know that if I wash my hands, that's 85% of it, right?
Question for you. How many readings have you had where it was somebody who had passed from COVID? That, like, I remember the first one I ever did took me like by surprise, because all of a sudden the reading, and this was in a group reading actually, it becomes a political conversation in the middle of speaking with Spirit. And Spirit, they still have their opinions. So I'm like talking to a ghost who's like, I died from COVID, but it wasn't really COVID. And I'm like, what?
That's it. That's it. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, now, as somebody that has diabetes, like they push the flu shots on you every year, and I never took it. And nurse friends of mine, center square notwithstanding, will be like, take care of yourself. That's the thing. And I'm like, nope, Spirit is very clear to me. Once I hit a certain age, once I'm north of whatever I'm in, my parents should get it, etc. But I'm in a reading and I say to this woman, and I'm describing to her in detail, now I am somebody that has done 20,000 readings in my career. I know how people die when they want to show me. Like I have an entire book of what they're showing me and how I can convey it. And I was describing in depth how the heart gave out, how things were going on, how they had esophageal issues beforehand, how the heart had been an issue. They had underlying things. That's why they had certain fatigues and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And then she goes, well, he died because of COVID. And I
Mhm.
looked right at her and I said, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
And she
It-
said, well, it says on his gift certificate, on his death certificate. By the way,
on his
here's a
gift
service
certificate.
merchandiser gift certificate. Thanks for coming your entire life. It was
Same
Long
old
Island.
Philly.
It was Long Island. You can go ahead and put that on a gift certificate. No, but I got into an argument, and it wasn't about validation. I said, listen, I understand that you want to believe that it's COVID, and she wanted COVID to be the enemy. She wanted
So you have to like still deliver the message, still get through this conversation, and I
Mhm.
don't. It's I started reading post COVID.
Mhm.
Yeah, I started doing group readings post COVID, and the first time that came up, I was like, oh my gosh, and I just when you start officially reading, you never think it's going to be like controversial or political. You're just like, oh hey, I'm going to connect. They're going to give me a message. It's going to be all nice and heartfelt. And you very quickly figure out that they're not much. They're really not different than they were when they're here. They still have their opinions. They're a little bit more enlightened, but they're still a jerk if they were a jerk here. And it's crazy.
And listen, I'm gonna say this from the conspiracy side of it, because this ends up being like a whole topic of conversation about vaccines and what they were really. The state has even said we might have miscalculated how many people died of COVID because there were underlying issues and other things.
Oh yeah,
which is the whole reason why we had to make it into a pandemic, because they had underlying things. And then they say things like, people that have cancer, and they're like, oh, well, cancer actually, and I'm not minimizing anyone that has lost someone with cancer, but cancer doesn't kill someone. What kills them is the chemotherapy and the treatments and the whatever, and their heart and their bodily functions go. The cancer rarely, it does happen where the cancer takes over the entire body, but it still compromises all of the other functions. COVID is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
It decreased your ability to influx oxygen into your body when you talk about the science. So if I'm going to tell you that your lungs were filling up in a pneumonia-like way, or in a cancerian type way, or your heart had congestive heart failure, that is consistent with the things that I see without COVID. I had never delivered to anyone. They might have had COVID. They were alone in the hospital. That's what they showed me, but it wasn't COVID. Mm-hmm. And just to plant the seed of the conspiracy theorists in all of the readings that I've done, and I've done a lot of readings around New York City, a lot of people, and think about it, if you've lost somebody and you want to find somebody that's like truly authentic, you'll travel 2.5 hours up to Albany to find a good medium. I have met a lot of people that lost people in the towers. Mm-hmm. I have yet to find a single person who even knows somebody that lost somebody in one of the airplanes. Now, I've had people say, oh, I have a friend who had a cousin or whatever, but they didn't know them directly. Mm-hmm. And I'm planting that right now. When you talk to dead people, you eventually come across somebody that has had that connection. Mm-hmm. When you've done that many readings,
or some major catastrophe or event or something.
Correct, right? North Tower, South Tower, too many, quite frankly. I've read too many people with that. Mm-hmm. I still lose sleep over it. And my uncles were here from Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to go down to the 9/11 site." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going." I can't do that. I can't do it.
I had a Pan Am one. That was.
Did you?
Mm-hmm. It was a while ago. I didn't even know enough about the detail. I just knew it was a tragedy, and I knew there was weirdness surrounding it, but I didn't know the details until afterwards. They had told me. I was like, was there like a plane crash? I didn't really know what I was looking at, so I'm giving out there yeah. And then they told me they passed in the Pan Am, lost, tragedy, missing, whatever.
Wow, that's great.
And later on, I looked it up because I was like, I didn't know all the details about it. I'm like, holy shit.
Was it the Lockerbie one?
Is that the Scotland?
Yeah, the Scotland one.
Yeah.
So I once read someone, this is the short thing, and then we'll move on to the next one. I had somebody at a show, and they were standing next to me, and I'm reading somebody else. But of course, this is how spirit works. I'm having the conversation. I'm going, hey, I really think that you're going to be going to Scotland. Hey, I really think that you're going to be, you're chasing Nessie. You're doing whatever. And you also have a book coming out and you have blah, 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 blah. The guy next to me, it's like a little kid tugging on my coat and he starts pulling on my sweater. And I'm like, wait your turn. I'm making him part of the show and I'm, joking around with him, a little old guy. And then he goes, can I share something with you? And I'm like, sure. He said, here is my book about the day that I didn't get on the Pan Am flight that blew up over Lockerbie. And I'm like, judges, can I get half credit? And everybody's just like, I was picking up on his energy and he was right next to me.
That's nuts.
And he didn't get on the flight. He actually had 2 flights he didn't get on in his life. He had been struck by lightning. Like he was just one of those guys. And he had
just heard a story about this, like something similar.
His book came out. He came to one of my shows. I have the book somewhere. He'd be a great guest. Let's go.
I wonder where I just heard about. It must be the same guy if he's like somewhat local. I don't know. But yeah, it's just the way that like the world events come into your own little channeled whatever, your own little channeled world,
your own little thing, that thing you do,
that little just talking to ghosts,
you be you, insult of the year.
It constantly blows my mind because you're not connecting anything political or worldly. You're just trying to like connect with with the person in front of you. So whenever that crosses, it's like it's kind of mind blowing. You're like, this stuff really does matter. It's easy to kind of forget about it and have your opinions and bitch about it and tea about it, all that stuff. But when you realize like, oh, this personally affects people.
Yeah, like, totally. Well, listen, we don't want to lose all of our time here because we have a tendency of like finding these. Yeah, we got to talk about the Groundhog. And Daryl, I don't know if you want to call it audible. Do you think it's better if I talk about kind of the spiritual parts of Groundhog and bounce them off of Lindsay, or should we do the quiz first?
No, I think we should talk about the spirituality. I'm hoping I can share my screen because it won't let me open through PowerPoint. It says it's in use.
Huh, that's kind of weird. Well, hold on a second. Let me do my end of it then. So, does everybody not love the movie Groundhog Day?
Who wouldn't? Get off of here.
Yeah, we should.
You're not welcome here.
Like, you're no longer our. You're no longer our friend.
One by one.
It's like, oh, it's like they're not like Bill Murray fans.
Yeah.
Or they
loved COVID, so they're all dropping off.
Yeah, it was something we said about the COVID thing. Like we insanely, and we'll have 2 people
through our political opinions as soon as we bring up Groundhog. They're like, I'm out of here.
And by the way, we watched 2 viewers during that time. One of them was so pro-vaccine that they're just like, I can't believe the nonsense that you guys would spew. And then the other one was like, I can't believe you brought up the word vaccine. It tried to kill me, or whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna actually jump into here. I'm gonna use mine. Is that cool?
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
All right, so, oh, son of a gun, it did it when it saved it. It bounced it down. I worked so hard on this. Oh my gosh, I'm going to start drinking. So, Groundhog Day, no apostrophe S there.
It's noon somewhere is usually my phrase.
What? There's a Zoom somewhere? Is that what you said?
It's another good rule.
Wait a minute. Does it cure crotch monkeys? All right, so the Groundhog Day movie, of course, came out in the late 80s. I think it was 88 and into 89. And it was fueled by the writer-director Harold Ramis. And what's really cool about this movie, and I did not know this until I just went total geek on it, Harold Ramis's grandmother became a devout Buddhist and lived in a cloistered Buddhist community. And basically, it was kind of like a reverse Amish sort of thing where they had no technology except for one day of the week. And this is when they could have visitors and they could speak. But the rest of it was geared towards atonement, life-searching philosophies. Many of them were writers and so forth. So that
lifestyle. Then one day a week, just totally binge on TikTok. Like,
I'm thinking you follow us at Comedium Rose. And And what's great about it in terms of the influence is that he bounced it off of her. And they did a private screening actually for the community, and they all loved it. Like, so here it is. His test market was a Buddhist community to talk about the life things. And he's like, yeah, it's so many things, and I'm going to point them out here. And of course, Bill Murray does an amazing job at this. Say what you want about him as a person, as an actor, you know, the dipshit that he was in Caddyshack, and then, you know, the snarky Peter Venkman, and you know, he just tried at a bunch of other things, but this was really his best role because it was him. He didn't have to play around. Andie MacDowell got blessed by the gods with her looks and her ability to just deliver
to play
the
one character in every single movie she's ever been in.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Andie MacDowell, but like not a whole lot of
my
variation in her role.
16-year-old Brandon just stepped in and just said Andie MacDowell was once upon a time everything. And I'm just going to say I wanted to become an attaché for a senator. I wanted to become a doctor. I wanted to find Dale Beaverman. I almost my life story up until I was 18 was finding Dale Beaverman.
You wanted to room with an angel as well. Another one.
I wanted to. Oh, you have no idea. And then I wanted to eat a dolphin. And then I can go right down the line.
You're
right?
like Forrest Gumping Andie MacDowell.
I would so Forrest Gump Andie MacDowell. Can we just get that out of the way right now? I would absolutely run down a field and go to Vietnam for her. So
all the different Andie MacDowell.
Where do we go from here? And then of course Chris Elliott, and probably the role that he got. He actually catapulted him into all of his ridiculousness, which was a complete failure. Brian Doyle Murray
saved his life.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then Stephen Tobolowsky, who, again, personal scruples aside, plays his character to a T. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about this from the themes and the theories to it. So it has a spiritual theme, and the theme is that you're repeating things over and over again. And on the surface of it, you could very easily say it's about karma. You could very easily say it's about, are you paying attention to the karma? And we're just going to go through all of them.
Am I a god? That's a great scene. Great scene.
So is Phil a god? So one of the things that he brings up here is he says to Rita, I'm a god, not the god, but a god. Well, that is very much a Buddhist theme. It is a themology that we all predict and run all of our divinity, and that we are in control of everything. And of course, the snarky weatherman that he is, just the fact that he's a weatherman, he automatically thinks that he can predict things, that he could control things. Remember when he stops on the side of the road when it's all, when the road's closed, and he says, I make the weather, right? He shows time and again where he's explaining that he's in control. And he's, a narcissist. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But it's the idea that he had to accept his own divine power, his own ability to be able to recognize that he was divine within himself. Philosophies from mediums here. What do you think about that concept there, Linz?
I have some caveats to your comment about narcissism. I don't know if you're going to dive into it, but definitely narcissistic traits. I would argue egocentric.
I call it egocentrism. I don't know that it's narcissistic. Well, and the other part of this is that Phil, although doesn't care if he hurts somebody, he doesn't go out of his way to hurt people. So that's that might be the over, and we're just amateurs anyways.
Like this scene is actually more towards like the beginning of that, starting to question things. It's coming out of the confusion. Is this after he tries to kill himself or kills himself?
It's all one movie, right?
It's part of this kind of actually somebody said it in the comments, it's the fool's journey, it's the spiritual journey, and it's part of this. So I think it's very much so that egocentrism and the not really caring that completely turns around after he has his dark night and he like falls in love and he becomes a good person, and that's not possible for true narcissists. So I would debate.
And that's the whole part of this too, where it's like he has to start with the premise. So when you follow along in a spiritual journey, you do have to start to accept the idea that you are in control of your divinity. And look at it. He tries to externalize it.
I look at it like surrender. I don't look at it as taking control. I look at it like, this is it. Like,
but he has to get there. He has to get there. Think about it, though. He starts to externalize it when he goes and he says, is there any hot water? Well, no, not today. Like, how am I not in control of this? Hey, this is a sign of a really good producer, right?
Yeah.
Like, go fix this. Go whatever. He starts to externalize it because he's starting to realize the things that are making him feel uncomfortable. And he has to start owning it. And he doesn't yet. He tries to externalize it.
That, and then he turns it around to make other people's day better, which is the interesting piece. It's like he has to go through the ego trip. He has to go through the complete chaos and despair, ultimately, to get to the point where he's like, oh, this isn't about me.
Correct. Yeah. And you're skipping to the last slide on this because the next part of this, and this is a really fun thing in the the internet thing. And by the way, if you want to lose, and most of the videos and even the concepts about this are really short and sweet. It goes into how Ned the Needle Nose, and by the way, how is the devil often depicted, but with a needle nose, Needle Nose Ned, who dated his sister, which, that's a whole other thing. It's funny. He's so egocentric. An egocentric part of it is that he doesn't even remember that he dated his sister.
Right.
He doesn't even remember it. Like, as in, like, you were at my dinner table and I don't remember it. So it was really about him.
I actually made a comment about this, the first scene last night when I was rewatching it. I said to my husband, I go, maybe this is the result of going to a very tiny school, because I graduated with like 63 people. I was like, but there's no way in hell that you wouldn't remember.
There were 40 kids in my homeroom.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's no way in hell this would ever be reality. But again, it's just, you accept things for the sake of getting through movies. But you're totally right. Like, this is also a complete confirmation of his just disregard for anyone else.
Completely. And then you take a look at the role that Ned has in this. He's an insurance salesman. He's a leech. He's living off of other people. All those characteristics of the devil, right? This is also why people think that this mirrors the Dante's Inferno theme. This is why people think that it's connected to that. Everything from when he takes off his hat and his hair swirls forward into horns, to him consistently chasing in that phrase of watch that first step, it's a doozy. So in other words, he's talking about falling off into the comically deep,
it's the fool card
hole. Yeah, it's the fool card, and it's the fool's journey. Exactly. And then, but though that comically deep pit that he walks into, and then it's like, oh shit, he took the jump, he took the leap, he's running away from him. Then the fact that what happens at the end of it, when he finally, quote unquote, in the theory, sells his soul, what does he do? He gets the body, the body, home, health, auto, and with the optional death and dismembership, like he just goes down the entire line of it about how he bought everything. And in that scene, and he says, to Rita, this guy's amazing. Like, as in, he finally vouches for him, and Rita's finally kind of seen it. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but that's also where he's like, what are you guys doing? And then she's like, let's not push it. Like, in other words, you already got one soul today, you're not getting another. The devil theory, the Ned is a devil theory, is comical and applicable.
Well, the other thing that I absolutely love is the last time he sees Ned, he brings him in, does like a weird embrace that makes Ned so uncomfortable that Ned turns around and leaves. And to me, that is the complete
Dark night of the soul. I now own it.
I own it. And also, like, I'm not afraid of you. You're really nothing. You're just another, a wave on the energy length. Like, there is no good, there is no bad. It just is. And that's very Buddhist and very,
Oh, very much so. You control your fears. You control the thing that you're trying to work against.
Like, I'm gonna out weird you. Like, when
I'm
all
gonna
else
put-
fails, just out weird.
I'm going to
them.
put chocolate chip cookies. I'm going to wear chocolate chip cookies as a bra. Do you remember when Lady Gaga wore the meat suit?
Yeah.
And everybody went, boy, that's a little bit too much for me. She was like, okay, I got them where I want them.
Yeah, I can do
Like, it
whatever
was
I want.
100% a tester for her to be like, look at what you're doing. Like, it was almost a PETA thing for her to wear a meat suit. But she pushed the envelope on everybody. And one of the things she talked about afterwards was, I now know what makes people uncomfortable. Like, she didn't know before.
Yeah,
You know,
she had to figure out what it was.
putting a trouser sock down the front of her pants wasn't enough, right? So the other conversation here with Ned too, as we wrap him up, is that he also, through the arc of it, he's not able to understand what Ned needed from him or what would satisfy the devil. And by the way, insurance is about taking care of the next generation. Insurance is about doing the things for the family and leaving a legacy and that sort of thing. He doesn't realize that he needs to leave a legacy behind, and then he satisfies that. But it is a bit of a deal with the devil, because you're like paying money into something. I get an invoice every month from my insurance, my life insurance, and I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, all right, well, this is my kid's jet ski, my kid's bad decision, right?
My kid, what about my jet ski? Like,
yeah, I know.
Oh, just a sec before you move on to the next one. I like Elizabeth's comment that Ned is a reflection of his own demons.
Well, is that the devil, if not anything else?
Right.
Of course. So
exactly.
And the lack of awareness, because he doesn't even recognize him at first. Doesn't even recognize him at first, isn't like he doesn't have. Oh, and by the way, back on the spiritual trail, this is about the lack of self-awareness that you have when you first start out in this, is where you're just like, did I do that? Like, we don't do that in the spiritual thing. And, my lessons are like, so like basic and in your face, but here's a really simple one. I didn't realize how much I just controlled the conversation all the time. And then I realized, oh, it's because I'm always seeking blah, blah, blah. Once I wrap my arms around that, I could be like, oh, I'll have a co-host. Like, I never
chick try it out.
Forget. Oh, and you're a woman? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm kidding. Oh my gosh, I'm totally kidding. But no, that ends up, that self-awareness thing of like, oh, I'm sorry, I totally spoke through you, or hey, that was just a part of the thing. And then in my mind, I'm like, I'm just excited about it, and I'm like, oh, well, grown-ups get control of that stuff, right? And then it ends up being like another.
What's a grown-up anyway?
Another thing. And anything else here, Daryl?
Oh no, I just wanted to. I just like that as an
love it. And of course, those of you that can see her comment, Elizabeth also talks about, as an observation, her father was a local weatherman here in upstate New York, Mr. Wolf, and he was. There's a funny story. I met Elizabeth when I was like 4 years old because it was on her father's show, and she was at work that day. It's pretty funny. So is Phil egocentric, right? Off the narcissism thing, but egocentric. Because you're right, narcissism has an undertow of like deception to satisfy personal wounds, right? I mean, at the center of every narcissist is somebody that's wounded. If they don't face their wounds, true to what you're saying, like if you're not able to face it, that is a trait of narcissism, because you avoid it. You do the magnet push, like whenever it gets close, you're like, oh, look at that, and then they just miss all the time, where they don't actually address it. But somebody that's egocentric will have a low sense of self-awareness, as we were just talking. They'll also be like, why else would I have anything else? And again, think about his archetype. He has no family. He has no whatever. He goes by the flow of the I'm on TV when. Like, that was his life. His life was the schedule. His life was, you need to make me look good, producer. Cameraman, get me from over here. He wouldn't think to consult them. He would just say, go do this. And the fact that he was the center of his own, the center of his own story all the time was self-explanatory. And one of the pieces where each one of the scenes shows him growing up, right? Or going through something where his ego death has to go in. And sometimes we have to learn through weird circumstances or lessons that really hand it to us. And do you remember the scene with the two guys from the town where Phil is literally spilling out his guts to these two, you know, childish, high schoolish,
Oh, at
you
the
know,
diner?
with Overton and Document. And the two of them are just like, yeah, can you imagine living the same life every single day until whatever, which was exactly what they were doing.
And it's not until
Exactly.
that point that he starts questioning, well, what would you do with it? Like up until
Correct.
that point, he's like, what am I doing here? Like I can be doing whatever I want.
which I could really go for some flapjacks and there'd be no consequence. Well, those two things get them on a railroad track, get them pulled over, running over the the mailbox and hitting the groundhog. Again, there's symbolism through each bit
Is
of
there
this
a guy
movie.
with a baton here looking for me? Anyone?
maybe a gun and a baton. No, okay. Will you be checking out today? And you notice how it goes down a percentage every time you tell them, you know, like a 75 to 80%, and then 50%, 10%. Like he just those are the witty comical things that you can see that he's progressing somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But in that scene, you know, can we get 2 cheeseburgers, some fries, and some flapjacks? Was a very kind of like telling thing where when the bars close on him, he's just like, I'll be out of here tomorrow. There is no consequence. He started to realize that if you don't change, then your consequences won't ever teach a lesson either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you have to have that willingness to go there. And even this scene here that, you know, that's up on the screen, when he steals the groundhog and drives off the edge of the cliff and it explodes. And of course, Elliot has Elliot has a best line. It is the height of his career when he goes, he could be all right. And then it explodes and he says, yeah, probably not.
This was pre-Wookiee days, I think, right? I think.
Oh my gosh, it's pre-everything. It's pre-everything for
career.
him. Yeah, whoever cast him, he should get the biggest fruit basket from him every year. But again, though, the egocentric thing was he learns these things through the little things. And even when you look at the arc of when he was doing things for himself versus finding things for others, even when he did things for others, he started to recognize that or at least I recognize, he was doing them because he didn't want to feel the pain. Why did he take in the homeless guy and give him the soup? It wasn't because he wanted him to live. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to feel the guilt of him dying, thinking he could have. Correct. Mm-hmm. Right. And then he's hooking up with, the town trollop with Nancy and having her dress up and go see. Thing
is just
go see a child's film, which is just I mean, it's just so wrong. It's awesome, and it's just borderline. Everything is borderline. Everything is borderline, which is classic Ramis, by the way. Harold Ramis was classic borderline.
What he does so wonderfully is weave in, not even weave, like the entire movie is a spiritual theme, but you can also watch it at face level and never try to think about it, just completely enjoy it.
We watched it 100 times thinking it's just funny.
Yeah.
And then we started it on our spiritual path. And then I'll never forget when I did watch it, probably about 10 years ago. It was a snowstorm. I was stuck at home and I'm like, oh, Andy's on.
Mm-hmm.
And then
See, I would have gone with multiplicity, but
it's the one that got away. I'm just letting you know. Dale Beaverman, I am not kidding you. I had a picture of Andy McDowell in my locker. And and I also had a whole bunch of like androgynously heterosexual like things, poison and whatever.
Poison.
And every heavy metal, and then I had to put Metallica in there just because I needed a couple of grease balls to even it up and be like, oh man.
Everybody needs.
Anyways,
in their life.
Then they cut their hair and got pretty. Anyways, I digress. So Andy McDowell was like my centerpiece, and but I'm laughing about it because it was my joke was like I got to go see Dale, and people would be like, who are you going to see? I'm going to see Dale, which meant I was going to my locker, and I would see my Andy McDowell picture. Anyways, I digress. Shaker 1991. Because I talked about it. So I'm sitting there watching it with this evolution behind me, and I was stuck on certain things. And this next slide really was my epiphany that day, was like, what did he learn? Like, what is this about? And this is like the final scene where he's eating pizza in bed with Rita, by the way, it is also, if you blow it up, you can't really see it. There were also some other things in this of a bunch of other theories that there was like a doomsday thing going on. It is 2 minutes to midnight on the clock whenever he would go to sleep.
Doesn't-
Which people were saying to Harold Ramis, like, was that your indictment on like the doomsday clock? And he goes, what are you talking about? Like classic Ramis. Like,
That was
I
just
don't
the
fucking
clock
know.
in the room that never got changed when we did the filming.
Pretty much. I think that's what he said too. But
It's really easy to read into. It's weird because most movies, every single thing is for a purpose, for a reason. Whether they reveal it or not is a different question. But then other times it's just shit in the room. And it's so easy to develop these like crazy in-depth theories. And then for the directors to be like, didn't think about it.
I'm gonna tell you that this scene alone is dripping in metaphors. Dripping in metaphors. When you look at the lamp, it looks like flames, like he's in hell. When you look at the boxes on the right-hand side, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. 5, which is screaming change for him. There are 8 slices of pizza, which is eternity. She is sitting in the lotus position. She figured it out. She is enlightenment. He's sitting like a slacker on a park bench. Right? Like there is so much symbolism here where her light is off to the side and you can't really see it, but yet the way the shadows fall, it highlights her. She's the light sitting in the dark. Like there is so much to this. Oh, and the napkin sitting in front of him, he's got to clean up his act. Like just that alone is that scene and that still shot. So what he learned though, when you go through all of the lessons, when he's trying to catch the kid, when he's trying to
you never thank me.
Right, you never thank me, you little jerk or whatever. And there's a lot of things in this that he starts to do because you think he's trying to learn a lesson, but he's doing it because he's protecting his own thing. He wanted to be a hero, so he's trying to catch people. He wanted to impress them with music, so he started to learn it. And all of this you think it was in the pursuit of Rita. And then at the end of it, when they're sitting there in simplicity, he is not playing music. He is not reading poetry. He is not speaking French. He's not doing any of those skills that he was doing. He simply was. I'll say that again. All of those things that he worked on, he could just simply be. And by doing that, that's where he flipped the script. He did the right thing along the way, like make sure that he didn't choke on the beef, giving out WWE tickets, which is hysterical, and that he would, get them wrestling tickets and so forth and so on, because it's like, how is that a path to enlightenment? He's not the one enjoying it. They are. Why is it that he was able to change that tire? Oh, he must be from the motor club. He was doing it because he eventually realized that those things weren't making it happen. He had to do all of it. So from a karmatic standpoint, you might think that he's trying to make up for all the bad things that he's done, but karma doesn't work that way. What karma wants you to do, the entire integral relationship of karma isn't a get-some relationship, because there is a good chance that our soul will never be even when it comes to that. But what we can do, and the saving grace in this, is that you can learn the lesson and move forward, right? The best day to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best day is today. You cannot change it aside from what you do moving forward. You cannot make that tree grow bigger. You have to accept it where it is. And what's, for me, this entire thing with Rita is that, guess what? She was the enlightenment. She was
who she was the entire time, from the very first scene.
And it was something where she knew who she was from the beginning. Like back on the early part of it, when he basically says it out loud. And by the way, we all do this. This is one of the most important things you could do during your spiritual journey, is when he turns to her and says, I'm really needy and I make it about myself. And she says, yes, Phil, that's your defining characteristic.
Yeah.
She holds up that mirror where Ned is showing up one mirror, So is Rita. By the way, so is Chris Elliott.
So that's interesting because I mean, there's the theory about the devil and God and who's who, and then she truly is enlightenment, where she's right in the middle, which to me would be, source godly, but she is the neutral.
She doesn't care. She's not
Mhm.
vested, and she's not like. And even when he's trying to figure out how to score with her, and he's like, "Right, no white chocolate." Even when he's doing stuff like that and going, she likes this and she likes that, right? Those are things, the vermouth thing, and by the way, who drinks vermouth? You had better be a divine light if you're going to drink fucking vermouth. Are you kidding me? Have you ever, by the way, I ordered a vermouth once because I'm like, maybe Andy will show up. And by the way, she drinks bourbon. By the way, because of my extensive knowledge of Andy McDowell, aka Dale Beamerman, she drinks bourbon. She is a good Southern girl. She just bourbon, rye, whiskey if it's done right, but vermouth. Are you kidding me?
Also loves pie.
Right. All right. Well, listen, that's all I'm going to say about me there. Yeah. So what I mean, what do you think about this? Is like Hollywood does this all the time. They give us nuggets like this that are just on the face value. They do.
There's a handful. I think there's a handful of creators, directors, producers who make sure those are the projects they're working on.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also
Harold Ramis is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also that's a pretty good observation too. And I think Harold Ramis, like, you can find spiritual meaning in Caddyshack a little bit. You can find it in National Lampoons because that has everything to do with men trying to figure out their own vibe and what they need to do. And this is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's totally the midlife crisis, but
which feels like every day. But This is crazy.
Right.
What's interesting though, and like I didn't know the background about Harold Ramis, but Dan Aykroyd is his father and his grandfather. That's entire mediumship background, and he's hosting this new show actually now, Unexplored Expedition. I don't know, Unknown Explored or something. And I just started reading his dad's book, which is like all about history of spiritualism. And I may have
Aykroyd's father.
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd's
father. Wow.
And so his grandmother hosted seances, and his father, as a young boy, would kind of like sneak in and watch them, and eventually they were like, come on in. So his father was very much so involved at like the beginning of the blow up of modern spiritualism, and they practiced that when he was growing up, and when Dan Aykroyd was growing up and in his house. So I didn't know about this connection until recently, and I started diving in. And obviously Harold and Dan did so much work together along with Bill Murray.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so interesting.
Chevy. Did you almost just say Chevy Chase?
Well, I was going to say Chevy. And what's so interesting to me is Chevy is like, as a human, not like he's not spiritual, or if he is, he doesn't present. And it's like,
I have a Chevy story real quick.
Chevy, so involved in all of these projects and Lampoons, and he's amazing and he's hilarious. And it's kind of funny that him and again, I don't know him. I just kind of know the stories and the background and the stories about other actors working with him. Maybe he's a super wonderful person and everybody lies about it. I don't know. But
the original Ghostbusters were supposed to be Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, and Dan Aykroyd, not Harold Ramis. And when Chevy backed out, he said, "You guys do too much with this ghost shit. You're going to ruin your career, and fuck Bill." Like, that was literally his thing back. But did you know what famous band, and they are famous, band he was in college?
Who? Chevy?
Just, like famous.
No.
He was roommates with Donald Fagen and was in the original Steely Dan.
That's funny.
Yep. He played some guitar and bass for him, and that's how he knew Paul Simon, which is how he ended up in that video, because he would sit in. He was a drummer, really.
Mhm.
And he would sit in and he would just play the backbeat for these guys to play their keyboards and, all that other good stuff. So yeah, oh my God, we can totally do a Chevy, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray show. But I think we should get to some questions. What do you think, producer Daryl?
Let's do it.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, you just have to go with your screen there, Brandon.
Okay. Can you control that or no?
No.
Yeah, you can. You just did it now.
If you
What
upload
says-
it, Brandon, Daryl should be able to drop it in.
Brandon, it's right there. There you
There we
go.
Oh, all right. So these are questions about the movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Daryl, take it away.
All right. What was the name of the cafe in Punxsutawney?
So I want to stall this out a little bit so people can guess this as well. So we've got Helen's Diner, Tip Top, Punxsutawney Place, and Top Hat. Oh,
can I
what
guess?
do you remember from it? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I don't remember, even though I watched it last night. But I'm gonna go with 1 because it's very hell oriented, and everything else is symbolic.
Mm.
I'm gonna say I remember there being some sort of hat involved, but I'm gonna go with Tip Top. Like it's a Tip Top diner.
I little fun note. I did notice at the diner, there's a thing on the wall directly behind Bill, and it says some place of the spirit, or it says something of the spirit underneath it, and it's like a picture of the groundhog and a top hat. But I thought it was like of the spirit. I was like, what? It was just weird. It was like, that's obviously there for a purpose.
So the hat has something to do with it. Well, that's kind of cool. Daryl, what do we got? I see a couple of top hats there.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's actually Tip Top.
Tip Top.
Yeah. Brandon's got 1.
Oh, hold on a second. Was
No, you went Top Hat. He doesn't got 1. That was a draw.
was Andy McDowell in the scene?
Oh, I thought he said Tip Top.
We can't give him credit yet.
If
Okay.
Andy McDowell, you got like 8 questions, right? 7, 8 questions. I can go south in a hurry.
I'm
Okay.
feeling I don't know, vulnerable. I got 0 on the last quiz we did.
We
all good.
definitely this is definitely speaking to my Leo rising. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Next one. At the beginning of the movie, when Phil's doing the weather, what was the nation's high temperature on February 1st?
I'm going to say 79 just because Florida. Nation, right?
Nation high.
I'm gonna go 62.
Brandon would be right. 79 degrees.
I would have guessed the same, but I didn't want to be the same.
Be different for different sake. All right, next one.
Story of my life.
Mhm.
Who was Nancy's high school English teacher?
Oh, I know this one.
I'm going to let you guess because I do know this.
It's number 2. It's Mrs. Walsh.
Yeah, I'm going to give you that one. That's
Correct.
definitely Mrs. Walsh. Mrs. Walsh?
Correct.
Walsh.
Daryl, is that the
Great.
answer?
Yep. Yep.
Final
Nancy.
answer. You want to phone a friend?
Final answer.
Okay.
All
Mrs.
right.
Walsh.
How much money does Phil pay the piano teacher?
I know.
Trick question.
Oh, trick question.
No, it's not.
Because just because we only see him once doesn't mean that he doesn't pay her that every day.
Oh, well, okay.
Well, that doesn't matter.
That answer wouldn't even be on here. The answer is number 4.
I think it's 500.
Okay. Final answers?
Yeah.
I'm good. Locking it in,
Lindsay
Alex.
is right. Lindsay is right. It's $1,000.
It wasn't Alex. Who was the Regis was locking it
Regis.
in. Wrong host.
I kind of like this. See, yeah, thank you. Pauline said 500 too. Pauline and I are going to go watch a movie together. Yeah, that's what we should do. We should do like award-winning things where they get to do a watch party with us online, where we watch it and we all just like shoot the shit about it.
Comment on it the whole time. Yes, love it.
It'd
I
be
did
fun.
that with I used to do that in my own little private group for like ghost hunters episodes. I'd bring it up and just be like, this is bullshit the entire time. It was fun.
Be like, just because they go to a C flat doesn't, it's because they go to a C sharp doesn't mean it's actually scary.
Did you do that?
All right. Next
All
question.
right. How much did Larry sell for at the man auction?
Oh,
2 bits, 25 cents.
yep.
Yep.
I love
Numero
it.
uno.
I love it.
What is the name of Phil's sister who Ned said he dated? I know you guys talked about this.
I'm going to pull ahead. Mary Pat.
I'll agree with Brandon. I don't remember.
You are correct.
I dated your sister, Mary Pat, got the shingles real bad, did the Wrestling belly button at the talent show. So, by the way, wrap this around. I had somebody that I worked with, and we would ask each other, "Hey, how'd that interview go?" And then I'd be like, "Got the shingles real bad, did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show." Like I would say that for like a candidate that wasn't very good, because you can't actually say anything negative on somebody's thing.
Yeah.
You could just, everybody gets an A at the top. And then if you're really good, you put a plus. And if you're not very good, you don't put anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because people still think they got an A. Anyways.
All right. This might be tough. Who wrote the poem Rita recites to Phil over dinner?
Whitman.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not positive, but I was going with Whitman.
Final answers?
It's Frank Walter Scott, but I'm going to
Is
say
it?
Whitman. I don't know. I'm trying to trick you up. Hold on a second, Daryl.
I was aiming towards Walt Whitman, but I really don't know the answer is.
All right, Daryl. What do you
Okay.
think?
It's number 3, Sir Walter Scott.
I'm going to give you that one.
It's like use your psychic skills.
Hey. You got him for a reason.
If
Use it.
anybody was wondering what good psychic skills are, clearly it's not on quizzes.
And first of all, so back on the movie for 20 seconds here, do you get that as to why it is that it was Heidi 2, Lindsay?
Huh?
Why he chose Heidi 2?
I'm
Why they
having
chose Heidi 2?
No, I don't. That's not a reference I understand.
So the Heidi game is very substantial to football fans, because the Heidi game was the Jets versus the Raiders, and they were making a comeback. And sure enough, they had at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m., whatever, they were going to go to Heidi to show the movie Heidi.
Oh.
And they cut right to it. So they were never able to be shown the finish of the game. So Heidi 2 is a callback to something that interrupts and never gets finished.
Oh, very cool.
How am I doing?
There's a little nugget for you.
It's
There you go.
the answer to this one, I believe, is 2. I think it's Alpine.
Alpine. I actually. I'm gonna call. I really don't know this one. I'm gonna call it the Paramount.
Lindsay's got the winning answer, number 2.
That was one of
Awesome.
those, like, saw it in the background, made an impression in my brain because I could relate it to something else and didn't think about it again. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was Alpine.
Well, I think it's also important too that Alpine theater is how cold it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as in, like, it's stuck on Alpine. It's stuck on cold.
Mhm.
Wow. Very cool. Is that the last question, or do we have more?
We got another one. Where was the movie
Oh.
actually filmed?
I was curious about this when I was
I
watching.
know this. I'm going to let you answer, and then I'm going to say the answer.
It makes me sad that it wouldn't be in Punxsutawney.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Reading.
With where? Reading?
Mm-hmm.
It was in Woodstock, Illinois, correct?
Correct.
Mm.
And what made me curious about it is, of course, Woodstock, New York, thinking, hey, in the Ned scene, there is a Woodstock
Yeah.
sign in the background, and it gives it away. And I thought it was Woodstock, New York. I'm like, I wonder if they did some location stuff down there. And I looked it up, and it was Woodstock, Illinois. Yeah, that's really cool. And part of the reason they chose that, go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, I was going to say they chose that because it's Bill Murray's hometown.
Oh, I was watching it last night as he was like walking down the street next to all the buildings, and I was like, I bet this isn't actually Punxsutawney. It's like in Supernatural. They do an episode in Lilydale, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
They actually had
Great show, by the way.
I don't know.
Right. They actually had there's of course, a whole bunch of stuff out there about Harold talking about the movie. That's actually where I learned a lot about his grandmother and being in a Buddhist cult. I mean, commune.
That's a cult.
Well, here we go. Last week's theme.
Slip of the tongue.
But no, what he did, is that all the questions, Daryl?
Let me see. I think there might be two.
Okay.
There might be two more.
Yeah, you know what? Let's wrap this up, and then we'll do some final thoughts. But ice cream.
Yeah. So, what ice cream does Phil have chilling on his windowsill that Rita likes?
I think it's mint chocolate chip.
I'm going to say butter pecan.
No, it's number 4.
Rocky Road. Which kind of makes sense.
It is a rocky
Kind of
road.
makes sense. Rocky Road. Oh my gosh! What leads me to another theme in 80s movies where Back to the Future is on October 25th, and The Goonies is also on October 25th, and Rocky Road is on the windowsill, and Goonies yells Rocky Road, and then Hey You Guys, which is a callback to the electric company that Morgan Freeman was on. Like, there are so many loops connected to that stuff. It's crazy. Crazy.
What's the Morgan Freeman thing?
Do you know when he is coming down the sale?
I know the Goonies scene.
He says, Hey, you guys. Well, that was a throwback to the electric company, which was a PBS show. And at the beginning of it, they always said, Hey, you guys. Okay. And Morgan Freeman at the time was like a struggling actor. Like he had nothing. Like he literally was living on $85 a week that they paid him per episode. And he, it was like 1969, 1970, but that was the opening line. And then there is another thing that he says in Shawshank.
Yeah.
You got to believe in yourself, which throws back to the Goonies speech when he's like, Goonies never say die. We have to believe in ourselves. Like there's like a lot of mirrors. There are so many themes that like interact and interlock to that.
Just loved Baby Ruth, though.
Baby Ruth?
Baby Ruth? That's what
impressions.
I do often. And people, the people who get it are like, the people who don't.
I love how you just say that. You're like, Zingo. But it's also, it's funny how entertaining these movies are and how much we watch them over and over again. How many times do you think you've watched Groundhog Day or parts of it? Not even the whole thing.
I don't even know. 20 to 30, probably somewhere in there. Like, it's one of those ones when it's on, you just stop and you watch it.
Daryl, what about you? How many times do you think you've watched it? Like bits and parts of it?
Not that many. 4 or 5. Yeah.
This is a part where a condescending producer comes on and says, this is a part where the condescending producer comes on and goes, I have a life.
I don't just sit and watch 80s. What year was this movie, by the way? I should have looked it up and I didn't. Was it 92 or was it 80s? I don't know why young Josh.
One
Brolin.
sec.
Oh, we got to do show on
Bring that up. Let's IMDb that real quick.
the IMDb. If I'm
couldn't
gonna
live-
say, maybe it's 89.
I couldn't live without my IMDb app. It's like right there.
Oh,
It's on speed
Ye-
dial when I'm watching TV. Like,
you know, I have an IMDb page, right?
what do you mean a page?
Yeah, I have a page for all the work I've done.
It would be nice.
Oh, like your own page? No, I did not know that.
And neither did I,
Sorry.
because I just made it up.
I
But-
missed that on my last Google search of you.
Oh my God, have you ever been accused of doing a Google search in the middle of a reading?
No, I'm just.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I'm like,
I
a true
do
story.
tell
Somebody's
people
like, you
ask
had to have Googled me. There's no way anybody would have known that.
People will ask that question. I'm like, you think I have the fucking time?
Who has the time? I'm like, and my reaction is always the same thing. I'm like, I'm too busy going through your garbage.
I don't like it when people give me any more. Like, I don't like that I make my own. What a comment. Congrats, Brandon. You rank amongst the porn stars.
Just open the door. You can see me from there.
Yeah, pro on there too. Way to bring them down a few notches. I love it.
By the way, over on YouTube and Magical Mermaid, you are absolutely taking home the prize today. She's like, porn stars have their own page too.
She's like, yeah, so what?
You're welcome. You want a close up?
They're making a lot more money.
Per episode. Well, you have to. You don't have healthcare, but you need it. Every year for 35 years, let's clean this up and bring it home. Pauline watches it on a regular basis. Yeah, go ahead and put it in the comments how many times you think you've seen bits and parts of Groundhog Day, because it is a regular staple. I'm sure it's going to be on today being the second. And by the way, once again, guys, I'm going to go back to this. It is 100% right there.
Right in the middle.
Symbolic. February 2nd. It is known as the candle mass. This is where you, from a pagan ritual, you light the candle to keep the light going, to spread the light. This is where you begin to spread the light, because guess what? It's getting lighter out. Are you starting to feel it, by the way?
Oh yeah. I was actually up a little bit earlier than I usually am a few days ago, and I looked out my window and I'm like, oh my God, it's actually a little bright out right now. I was like, thank God. It's just, I feel January is a rough month for me. Like every year, I feel like I'm just like head down, trying to get through it. And then February always does have this little bit of a lift. I don't know. I dig it. Except I'm ready for these kids. Cassie has another week vacation in a couple weeks. I'm like, are these kids even in school anymore? I swear to God, every month there's a week vacation.
And by the way, when you were going to a 9 to 5, it didn't matter to you. You were just like, oh, the kids are home. I'll just, I got some PTO. I'll, whatever. And then when you are like an option to bring them to work, you're like, oh, right. And then another one in April, and then they're off for like a summer. I don't get that at all. But Carol, did you come up with when it was made?
Yes, 1993.
Oh, I was a year off.
The year I graduated college. Makes me feel.
I won't tell you where I was.
Nursery school. You were in nursery
You
school.
were in the baby.
I was in kindergarten. Okay, I was in school.
Daryl's out there making life choices and bad decisions. You were building blocks and, I don't know what the hell.
People.
Let's see, 93. Oh yeah, I was in the life choice space right there too. I'd hair up to here and I had hair down to here, and I was living on a prayer. That is 100. Whenever I make that reference, that's 93. That's 100% 93. Have drums will travel.
I was like hacky sacking with my brother, and I don't know, listening to Pearl Jam.
And I'll be oh yeah. All right. Well, listen, it's a good show. True story. So played a Pearl Jam song in a band, And our lead singer of this one band would get baked like so bad. Like it was just part of the persona. Like here I am back there, total teetotaler. I would have a shot at the beginning with the band and then not touch anything. And I would have like a beer as I'm unpacking, but that was more of like, I'm thirsty, make sure it's cold. Right. And sure enough, he gets up there and this is what comes out of this on Even Flow. Throwing the microphone down. He's got no mic. He's kicking the wire. So, I just grabbed the microphone and I just started, like I don't know anything, but I had the inflection down. So through the whole song, there was a group over here that like were like totally into the song and the groove and like just as a band, like it's such a groove laden tune. It's almost like it is the one thing where it is one of the few songs that you can say to Eddie Vedder, thanks for coming, but the band's got this, right? Everything else he's vocalizing it, but everything he's just singing. Which
was like, it wasn't just him. He was definitely the front runner, but there was a number of those guys doing that those days.
Yeah, you couldn't.
We still
Chris Cornell.
Yeah,
Chris Cornell, you couldn't understand half when he was in Soundgarden. Ugh.
Yeah.
But he could sing though. He would sing. He would.
Don't get me on the whole.
And then
on a whole Chris Cornell thing. I'm like, I'm on the other side of it. People are obsessed, and I'm like, I know.
How do you feel about that?
Loved his voice. I mean, his voice, amazing.
Beaker.
Yeah,
I'm Professor Honeybun. Your dew buddy, Honeydew. Professor Honeydew. I just call him Honeybun.
Yeah, you did.
Oh my God.
It's all right.
All right.
All right. We should
want to wrap up.
Listen, should wrap it up.
I'm going to make a commitment to everybody right now. We promise to do better next time.
We will do better next time.
We'll do better next time. All right, guys. Heart taps around the world. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to see the full version all the time, you are running out of your trial time. Make sure you become part of our audience member. It's just $2.99 a month. We're giving you great content behind the scenes. It's a lot of fun. You're going to be able to see this. By the way, this is going to sit out there for a day, and then it moves into the private section. We chop it up. You might be able to catch a scene or two, though. All right, guys. Thanks so much. All right, guys. See you soon. Keep going.